Twitter officially bans President Trump, and Democrats set to introduce articles of impeachment on Monday. And we talked to Melissa Woodford of Conservative Shoutout to provide commentary on how the state of Florida is leading the fight against big tech censorship. I'm Birjan Crispin, and this is Critical Conversations.
And I'm proud to be an American, where at least I know I'm free. And I won't forget the men who died, who gave that right to me.
Plenty to get to in today's news, and the past 48 hours have been crazy on the news cycle. But first, if you're like me, you're always trying to find the latest book to read. And for me, that is Bellwether Blues, a conservative awakening of the millennial soul. Bellwether Blues is written by author Jonathan Jakubowski as he highlights 7 different individuals' journeys from voting for the Democratic Party in 2012 to voting for President Trump in 2016. Bellwether Blues, you can get your copy now on Amazon or visit bellwetherblues.com. That's bellwetherblues.com. And now we welcome in Melissa Woodford of Conservative Shoutout. Melissa, thanks for being here.
Well, thank you so much, Birjan. It is an absolute pleasure to be on your show.
And as we mentioned in our intro, Twitter officially bans President Trump, among other leading GOP members and conservatives, including Dan Bongino and others. Melissa, your initial reactions to what's been going on the past 48 hours?
Sure. Well, just wanted to thank you again for raising awareness to this incredibly important topic right now. As you mentioned, Dan Bongino was taken off of Twitter. Also, Donald Trump, Michael Flynn, and Sidney Powell. All 3 of these people were removed from Twitter. Mark Levin, Lou Dobbs, and Rush Limbaugh all left Twitter after Trump was permanently banned. Dan Bongino actually said this, quote, "Twitter needs me. I don't need them. I provide them with content." Hopefully this leads to more high-profile accounts leaving Twitter. With Parler, they were taken off of the platform of Apple. So we see a clear movement to squelch free speech right now. Just yesterday, actually, the walkaway movement was completely deleted from Facebook. Leaders were blocked from their accounts, and over 500,000 testimonials disappeared. As you alluded to, Trump was taken off. Half of the country loved President Trump. And for them to completely censor him is absolutely unacceptable. According to a Gallup poll, Trump is the most admired man in America, even over President Barack Obama. So for them to censor him, the big tech oligarchs are basically having more power than the president himself. I think this is such an important issue right now, and I'm really glad you're raising awareness to it.
Yeah, there's a lot of good stuff to mine there. Melissa, we talked about different platforms banning these GOP frontline conservatives, Twitter being at the front lines of those efforts to silence the conservative message. What do you think it is about the values of faith, family, and freedom that are so detrimental to the left, and why do you think it is those values that are being censored so heavily over the past week or so?
I think, like what you're saying, they're opposed to those values of faith, family, and freedom, and they hate conservative thought. They hate President Donald Trump. They don't like the idea that he wants to protect the First Amendment, protect the family, protect the sanctity of human life. They want to try to suppress those values as much as they can. And
on the ideology or that idea of suppression, Senator Ted Cruz of Texas, and recently in the hearing, went after Twitter's CEO, Jack Dorsey. We actually have a clip, so go ahead and roll tape.
If you look at, we just recently had a Senate hearing with the big tech, the 3 big tech CEOs, with Google, Facebook, and Twitter. Twitter is the most brazen. We just recently had a hearing where Jack Dorsey testified with a beard that looked like he'd crawled out from under a bridge. And I got to admit, he is just openly, we are left-wing and we are going to silence anyone who disagrees. And essentially he said you can kiss his rear end if you disagree. Well, as I asked Mr. Dorsey at that hearing, who the hell elected you and put you in charge of what we're allowed to read? Look, Twitter brazenly censored the New York Post when it ran stories about Hunter Biden and Joe Biden's corruption concerning China, concerning Ukraine and Russia, and they just silenced it. Not only did they prevent you and I from circulating those stories, for 2 weeks they banned the New York Post. The New York Post is not some fly-by-night organization. It is the newspaper with the 4th highest circulation in the country. It was founded by Alexander friggin' Hamilton. And big tech has decided they're in charge of the media and they get to decide what's reported and what isn't.
Strong words there from Senator Ted Cruz of Texas. Melissa, your initial reactions to what the senator had to say.
Well, like Ted Cruz said, I think it's absolutely ridiculous that you have people like Jack Dorsey who are not allowing these people to speak freely, essentially because he says, I don't care, I just disagree with them, I have the right to shut them down. And no, he does not. Also, with the story of Hunter Biden being suppressed, that is absolutely not okay. This is a story that people deserve to know. Newspapers are publishers and they should have the right to talk about these things, but Twitter is not a publisher, as we're going to get into a little bit later. They are a public forum. This is big tech tyranny and it's absolutely unconstitutional. We're not communist China. This is the United States of America. So to see what's going on is absolutely not okay.
You know, as we talk about the president being censored, and he will actually be facing, as we kind of move into the next segment, the president will be facing an impeachment inquiry starting on Monday. Nancy Pelosi's foot soldiers will be introducing impeachment articles starting on Monday for inciting violence. And whether he incited violence or not is up to interpretation. But Melissa, we were talking earlier, and you mentioned several prominent Democrats who exist in this hypocrisy of inciting violence over the summer for the Black Lives Matter movement. If you just want to speak a little bit more to those examples and where in line that hypocrisy lies.
So yes, what they're doing is hypocrisy. So I'll just mention Kamala Harris, Maxine Waters, and Nancy Pelosi are just three that come to mind. About Black Lives Matter, Kamala actually said this. She said, quote, "We're experiencing a moral reckoning with racism and injustice that has brought a new coalition of conscience to the streets of our country, demanding change. To everyone keeping up the fight, you are doing something. You are doing something great. You are heroes of our time." So that's said in the context of riots, looting, destruction, and burning down churches. And so then Maxine Waters also said, "Get up in Republicans' faces and tell them that they're not welcome here." Nancy Pelosi, she also said that people should be rioting in the streets. Matt Gaetz said, "President Trump explicitly called for demonstrations and protests to be peaceful. You can moan and groan, but he was far more explicit than some of the Black Lives Matter violent rioters were this summer when he saw violence sweep across this nation." So Trump condemned violence at the Capitol immediately. Biden was hidden in the basement this summer. So to contrast those two things, there's a clear distinction.
Simply put, the left will do whatever it wants to do to pursue their radical political agenda.
We know that George Soros and people like him have funded people who were rioting this summer to stay in hotels. We know that they were actually trying to provide bricks and things for causing chaos. So all of this is reprehensible and should not be allowed to continue.
And if the president does get impeached, it'll be for the second time. Something has not happened in the history of the United States, and all of these Democrats are living in hypocrisy. And the fact that we have a vice president-elect who will probably become the president of the United States. Joe, get a food taster. If I'm Joe Biden, I get a food taster based off of the language and the rhetoric that Kamala Harris is portraying. She got to be on Joe Biden's ticket because of identity politics at its finest. She even dropped out before her first primary in her home state of California. Kamala Harris brings nothing to the Democratic Party and fits all their identity politics. And so, as we move into this idea of Section 230, as we talked about, what is a public forum, what is a publisher? The state of Florida in your home legislature is actually proposing legislature, House Bill 33, and I'll let you talk more about it. They're figuring out a ways or a platform to then sue big tech companies. If you want to go into that a little bit more.
Sure. So first, I want to touch a little bit on Section 230, what it is, and then kind of talk a little bit more about the bill itself. So for our viewers who aren't familiar, Section 230, and this is from Prager University, can be thought of this way. So, YouTube, which is owned by Google, it's a private company, and they can do anything they want if they're a publisher, but they can't do anything they want if they're a public forum. So those are two very different things. So a publisher chooses the content they want to put out there. So a perfect example of this would be the New York Times. If you submit an article to the New York Times, they do not have to publish it. They have full editorial control of what they want to be put out there. So for example, if they put out an article with a malicious lie or something that violates copyright law, the New York Times could be sued for that. So PragerU would also be considered a publisher. They can choose what they want to put on their websites, and most websites would also be considered publishers. So on the flip side, public forums are different. So a public forum could be a physical location like your mall, or it could be the local town square, or the city hall, or it could be a website even. So they allow you to exercise your free speech rights. So YouTube actually defines themselves as a public forum. And basically what you can do on YouTube is you make a video, YouTube will host it, and anyone with an internet connection can view it. So Facebook and Twitter are also considered public forums. A public forum under Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act is not subject. It's not subject for content placed on its site. So if someone makes a video about how to build a bomb, they cannot be legally sued, or they can't be legally held responsible for that. So public forums are a good thing because it allows us to share our opinion. But basically a long time ago, YouTube, Twitter, Google, and Facebook started acting like publishers and not like public forums. They want to have their cake and eat it too, but they have to choose one or the other. They just can't be both. Now, to go into House Bill 33, what this bill does is it's called the Stop Social Media Censorship Act, and it will basically allow you to sue social media companies for censorship. And Florida is the one that's spearheading this initiative. If you go to stopsocialmediacensorship.com, it will show you each state's different legislation that you can send to your state representative and try to have that draft legislation passed. So Florida is not the only state doing this. There are other states doing this as well. And if you go to stopsocialmediacensorship.com, you'll be able to find out how to do that in your state too.
And considering the next 4 years at least, this time can be a time of worry and of concern for GOP and like-minded conservatives. Just, what would your word of encouragement or exhortation be to younger conservatives across the country as you kind of grapple with this new wave of censorship and almost fear to speak out about your personal values if you're a conservative?
Yes. Well, one thing I know is that no matter what, Christ is in control and Christ is sitting on his throne at all times. There is probably going to be a lot of darkness that is going to come into our nation. But I think one word of advice to say would be pray as if everything depends on God and act as if everything depends on you. That was once said by my former pastor, Tim Keller. And I think it helps us to be put in the right frame of mind to pray, because God is king and he knows he has everything in control. But also we need to be diligent in this time to fight against the hypocrisy and the lies and the evil that is what we are going to see in this world. And we still have a lot of work to do in the coming years ahead.
As we struggle to live in the tension of the already but not yet, knowing that God is doing a new thing and that the truth will prevail. Strong words there from our very own Melissa Woodford of Conservative Shoutout. You can go follow her on Conservative Shoutout, Facebook and Instagram, and her YouTube channel as well. Melissa, it's always a pleasure to have you with us and providing your insightful information. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Where at least I know I'm free, and I won't forget the men who died, who gave